The Philippines is quietly building something in the middle of one of the world's most dangerous maritime flashpoints. And satellite images are now revealing just how serious those efforts have become. In the disputed Spratly Islands of the South China Sea, Manila is expanding a military-use runway on Thitu Island and upgrading a strategic port on Nanshan Island. On paper, these may look like ordinary infrastructure projects, but in reality, they are part of a much larger geopolitical struggle involving China, the United States, and control over one of the most contested waterways on Earth. For years, China has dramatically expanded its own artificial islands, military bases, radar systems, and Coast Guard presence across the South China Sea. The Philippines, by comparison, has often struggled to maintain even basic supply routes to its remote outposts. But now, that appears to be changing. New satellite imagery shows active construction, land reclamation, and growing military readiness on islands claimed by multiple countries at once. And behind these developments lies a bigger message from Manila. The Philippines is no longer willing to simply react to Chinese pressure. It wants to strengthen its physical presence, improve logistics, and make it far harder for any rival power to challenge its position in waters it considers part of its exclusive economic zone. In other words, this is not just about concrete, runways, or ports. It is about sovereignty, deterrence, and the future balance of power in the South China Sea. At the center of these efforts is Thitu Island, known in the Philippines as Pag-asa, which means hope in Tagalog. It is the largest Philippine-controlled feature in the Spratly chain, and the only one with a permanent civilian population. The island has long been strategically important because it serves as both a military and civilian foothold deep inside disputed waters. Now, the Philippines is significantly upgrading it. According to budget allocations approved by Manila, around 1.65 billion pesos were set aside to extend the island's runway from 1.3 kilometers to 1.5 kilometers. That extra length is important because it could allow the runway to accommodate larger aircraft, including some variants of fighter jets, transport planes, and military surveillance aircraft. Satellite imagery captured over recent months confirms that the construction is real and ongoing. Parts of the runway extension appear to be built over previously submerged areas, showing how aggressively Manila is trying to improve the island's capabilities. In addition, the government has approved funds for a sheltered port that would make supply operations easier during rough weather or emergencies. Analysts say these upgrades are closely connected to rising tensions around Second Thomas Shoal, another disputed area where confrontations between Chinese and Philippine vessels became increasingly dangerous between 2021 and 2024. During several incidents, Chinese Coast Guard ships blocked or collided with Philippine resupply missions, and one clash even injured a Filipino sailor. Those events appear to have convinced Manila that relying on vulnerable supply operations alone is too risky. A stronger runway and better port facilities could help the Philippines maintain a more permanent and resilient presence in contested waters. At the same time, construction is also taking place on Nanshan Island, known locally as Lawak. Though smaller and less famous than Thitu, the island occupies another important position in the Spratly chain. Satellite images show ongoing expansion of its port facilities, funded by more than 1 billion pesos from the Philippine government. The current port on the island is too shallow and narrow for larger ships, making logistics difficult. The new upgrades aim to solve that problem by allowing bigger Coast Guard and naval vessels to dock more easily. Experts believe this could significantly improve the Philippines' ability to patrol nearby waters, rotate personnel, and maintain long-term operations. While China still possesses overwhelming naval and Coast Guard superiority in the region, the Philippines is trying to improve what strategists call maritime resilience, the ability to continue operating despite pressure from a stronger rival. That is especially important in the South China Sea, where distance, weather, and supply difficulties often determine who can actually maintain control over remote outposts. China has spent years building massive artificial islands equipped with runways, missile systems, and military infrastructure. The Philippines cannot match that scale, but by improving smaller islands like Thitu and Nanchan, Manila is trying to strengthen its own network of access points and reduce dependence on risky resupply operations. Some analysts also believe the upgrades could support closer military cooperation with the United States, which has been expanding defense ties with Manila in recent years. Chinese experts have openly expressed concern that expanded facilities could eventually support U.S. military aircraft or Coast Guard operations, potentially increasing strategic pressure on Beijing in the region. What makes these developments even more significant is the political and diplomatic messaging surrounding them. Philippine officials are no longer speaking cautiously about the Spratly Islands. Instead, they are using increasingly direct language about sovereignty and national defense. Earlier this year, Philippine lawmakers and Coast Guard officials visited Thitu Island publicly and declared that the country would never give up its claims there. Soon afterward, Manila officially opened a new Coast Guard command base on the island during a ceremony attended by senior political and military leaders. The symbolism was clear. The Philippines wanted both its own population and foreign governments to see that it intends to remain active in the South China Sea for the long term. For President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s administration, these projects are also politically important domestically. Public frustration over Chinese actions in disputed waters has grown sharply inside the Philippines over the past few years. Videos of confrontations between Chinese and Philippine vessels frequently spread online, fueling nationalist sentiment and demands for stronger responses. Manila's growing alignment with Washington is also part of this broader shift. The United States has expanded access to military sites in the Philippines under the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, and joint military exercises between both countries have grown larger and more frequent. China views these developments with suspicion, believing the United States is using the Philippines as part of a broader containment strategy in Asia. Meanwhile, the Philippines argues that stronger alliances are necessary because of increasing pressure in the South China Sea. This creates a dangerous cycle where each side's defensive measures are seen by the other as aggressive escalation. In the end, the construction taking place on these small islands reflects a much bigger geopolitical reality. The South China Sea is becoming one of the central strategic battlegrounds of the 21st century. The Spratly Islands may look tiny on a map, but they sit inside waters through which trillions of dollars in global trade pass every year. The region is also believed to contain rich fishing grounds and potentially large energy reserves. That is why multiple countries, including China, the Philippines, Vietnam, Taiwan, Malaysia, and Brunei, all maintain overlapping claims there. But among all these disputes, the China-Philippines rivalry has become one of the most volatile. Beijing possesses enormous military and economic advantages, yet Manila is increasingly trying to push back through alliances, infrastructure upgrades, and stronger maritime presence. The runway expansion on Thitu Island and the port construction on Nanshan Island are part of that strategy. They are not large enough to transform the regional balance overnight, but they do make Philippine positions more sustainable and harder to isolate. And perhaps most importantly, they show that the Philippines is preparing for a long-term contest, not a temporary dispute. For now, both sides continue avoiding direct military conflict, but the risk of accidents, confrontations, or escalation remains very real. A collision between ships, a blockade gone wrong, or an incident involving military aircraft could quickly trigger a much larger crisis involving not only China and the Philippines, but potentially the United States as well. That is why these quiet construction projects matter so much, because sometimes the most important geopolitical battles are not announced through speeches or wars. They begin with runways, ports, and islands slowly expanding in the middle of the sea.